Oh my god, so I'm reading through the new update and I get a giant jump scare as I'm scrolling down to the bottom. Jagex just changed the economy significantly, and it's buried in the Yama Combat Achievements update. As of today, the Grand Exchange tax is doubling, going up to 2%, alongside a host of other changes to the item sinks and the way the tax works. Okay, so let's have a look. So as part of an ongoing commitment to maintaining a healthy in-game economy, we've made a change to the Grand Exchange tax rate. We understand any update involving your hard-earned gold can be sensitive, so we want to be fully transparent about the reasons behind the change. Why the Grand Exchange tax rate? Well, the amount of GP entering the game has steadily increased over the years, but our systems for removing that GP, known as money sinks, haven't kept pace. That's true. A change like increasing the GE tax is a meaningful step towards restoring economic balance, helping curb inflation and preserve the value of your wealth. So here's what's changing. The GE tax rate is going from 1% to 2%. Items under 50 GP will not be taxed. Now this rule already existed, but it used to be under 100 GP, and now the tax exemption is effectively halved. The tax cap of 5 million is still going to remain in place. That's exactly the same as it was before. So trading a Twistable on the Grand Exchange won't cost you 34 mil in taxes, it'll still cap at 5 million. And interestingly, any existing offers in the Grand Exchange will remain taxed at 1%, only new offers. That doesn't matter too much. Now on top of that, they're also going to be making some changes to the item sink. Now for those who don't remember, the item sink is something that was introduced originally with the 1% tax. Essentially, some of the money that was collected from taxing all the items in the game would be used to purchase specific items and then deleted from the economy. That way we'd effectively have an item sink and a gold sink from the same system. Now there are currently a few dozen items on this item sink list, and they are going to be making some changes to the item sink in this update as well. Firstly, they're adding only one new item to it, that being Burning Claws. But they are going to be making some changes nonetheless to some of the existing items. So there are 6 items that are going to be increasing the sink rate of. We have the Asmunten's Fang, the Lightbearer, the Arcane Index Prayer Scroll, the Dragon Lance, and the Dragon Pickaxe. A few items are going to have their sink rate lowered, that being a Spectral Spirit Shield, the Arcane Spirit Shield, and the Kodai Wand. And a number of items are just going to remove altogether. That being the Seradim Godsword, the Warrior's Ring, the Seer's Ring, Bando's Boots, the Sarachnis Cudgel, the Hydra Claw, the Kraken Tentacle, the Trident of the Seas, the Occult Necklace, the Preserve Prayer Scroll, why was that on there? And the Kodai Insignia. So that is a lot of changes. Let's discuss how this is going to affect the future of the economy and why they might have made these changes. Okay, let's start with the tax rate. Now, RuneScape lacks meaningful gold sinks. There's no doubt about that. The Grand Exchange tax is by far the largest gold sink in the game, followed by then my personal death costs of dying at the Colosseum in Yama. That's adding up to a lot right now as well. Now, it's very difficult to even know how effective the 1% tax was, because we can go back and look at items. You look at an item like the Twisted Bow and you can see this line here is the GE tax. Oh wow, as soon as we put in the tax, it went way up in price. That's kind of an outlier. Tons of the items on the list spiked up or went down. There's not really a consistent trend that we can see from at least the items that were added to the item sink list. Well, my guess is a 1% tax probably wasn't moving the margin that much, but of course it's better than nothing. Well, the very minimum allowed them to have a more effective item sink, which will show a bit more of a visible difference possibly. Because strictly removing just gold from the economy is hard to track. I mean, sure, there might be 2% less gold, or however much from all the trades, but we'll never know how fast the economy is inflating. I mean, realistically, a more effective way to reduce gold in the economy is to stop adding in dumb moneymakers like zombie pirates. Another random low-effort moneymakers that just print money. Now, I will give them credit. I think they've gotten better at this generally, but every once in a while, there's just a rogue update like that. It's like, what is this? This is literally just printing 2 mil an hour cash for no reason, or at least it was. Now, how does this affect flipping? Some people might be interested in that. Well, what happened originally when the 1% tax was added is the margins for each item spread by about 1%. People who are flipping kind of create the liquidity for items, and they're not in the business of losing money, so for most items, the margin will probably increase by 2%. Now for everyday players, it just might mean you might want to take the time to slowly sell your items for an appropriate price, because dumping it will mean you might lose 2% of the value plus the tax. Now because the tax cap remains the same at 5 mil, this change starts to affect items that are over 250 mil less and less. Effectively, items taxed from 50 GP to 250 mil will be taxed at 2%. Items over 250 mil start to have their tax rate decreased as you hit the cap. Now an item sink and a gold sink are kind of doing different things. The gold sink is trying to curb the inflation of RuneScape GP. If you look at moneymakers over the years, they have slowly crept up in how much money you can make at the top end moneymakers. Now sure, moneymakers like Theater of Blood, Yama, those aren't actually dropping gold generated items directly, but you can still track kind of how much gold's in the economy, and how much people are willing to spend for these high tier items over the years has gone up significantly. High-end moneymakers now kind of settle around the 10 mil to 15 mil per hour GP rates, where 5 years ago that was a ludicrous amount of money. Now it's like, if Yama's making less than 10 mil an hour in the first month, that kind of seen as like, oh, a little underwhelming. So Gold Sink is trying to just keep the value of the gold higher in the long term. The item sink is trying to actually just curb the rapidly decreasing value of certain items. Some items have natural item sinks in the game, such as the Tentacle Whip, deleting whips out of the game. So Jagex thinks the Burning Claw needs an item sink. Sure, the Burning Claw has gone down a lot, it's way cheaper than its sister item. And they've also increased the sink rate of the Fang, the Lightbearer, the Arcane, the Dex, the Dragonhunter Lance, and the Pickaxe. Now Jagex even acknowledges lower down that the real issue with most of these items is the sheer volume of them entering the game. Now it's funny to say that for those items they removed, but put an item like the Lightbearer on this list, the Lightbearer's gone, guys. It was fucked the minute that we made it that common and TOA started pumping out purples. The Fang and the Lightbearer, it's over. The Fang especially probably shouldn't be an 8 mil item, but it's too late. The Arcane and Dex possibly as well, and the Pickaxe is just so common now because you can get it from multiple sources. The Grand Exchange item sink is kind of kneecapped by how much money it's actually willing to go into it. Clearly it's a small slice, they even acknowledge it right here, is used for artificial item sinks, and there's never going to be enough money in that pot to fairly sink these items without just artificially pumping up an item that would just seem disingenuous. A much more effective way to curb the long-term decrease in these prices is just to make TOA purples, I don't know, maybe not as common when you're doing a 500. Maybe purple chances should have been capped a little bit lower. Unfortunately, a system like this just isn't quite powerful enough to fully right some fundamental problems. The fundamental issue is that most of the items on this list are just far too common, which in and of itself might not be an issue. I think a lot of these items maybe are just not attributed to the right piece of content. Like maybe the Fang should have been as rare as the Elidness Ward, and the Ward could have been a really cheap upgrade, whatever. Or Oathplate's a good example. Oathplate's coming from what is a pretty heavily farmed, accessible boss, which in itself is not a bad thing. That's great. People get to experience cool endgame bosses, but should a competitor to Torva come from something that is dropped so commonly? Mod Ash even released an up-to-date list of how many items have been sunk. And we can see a bunch of different items that were removed. We can see 17,000 Lightbearers have been removed, and there's still like 2 mil each. 400 Twisted Bows have been removed, 38,000 Bentos God Swords, 204,000 Kraken Tentacles. The item sink has removed items in the tens or even hundreds of thousands, but even an item like the Occult that has had 250,000 of them removed from the economy still is kind of just a drop in the bucket in the long term, and is much more at the whims of supply and demand. So on a day-to-day basis, how is this going to change? Well, not too much. The convenience of the Grand Exchange is too high. I don't think a 2% tax rate or even a 3% tax rate would be enough to move the needle. We have to remember when this tax was originally going to be implemented, 1% was not the de facto number. People thought it might be higher. And obviously Jagex now thinks it should have been as well. So when you're selling your items, maybe take a second, put them in for the mid price, don't dump them. Especially items in the like 100 to 200 mil range. Like if you just get an Oathplate chest as a drop, Now you're losing like 3.5 mil by selling it straight up, and then you might lose another 2-3 mil in margin. So that's like a 6-7 mil loss you might get on this item. So yeah, take your time. Maybe don't buy and sell items for specific content. If you're buying an item just to do a Slayer task, you might lose 5 mil on it. Who knows? Alright guys, that's it for me. Hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think of the Grand Exchange tax. I'm sure you're going to anyway. Talk to you guys later.